On today's episode of the Going Commando podcast, we break down all of the preseason cuts heading into the final 53-man roster. We look ahead to week 1 versus Jacksonville, break down the Commanders' ranking on the NFL.com Power Rankings, and finish up with some trivia. So stick around, should be a good one. And without further ado, let's get the show started. Welcome to Going Commando, a Washington Commanders podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the Going Commando podcast. My name is Tom with my co-hosts Chris and Clark. How are you boys doing today?
Feeling good, feeling ready to attack another podcast and give you both some fire takes that I know are going to be the best.
Absolutely, yeah. Definitely some things to talk about since we last spoke, for sure.
And let's get right into that. What do you guys have on your reactions to this roster now that we have gotten the cuts?
I mean, I think there were certainly a lot of surprises with the cuts. You know, you had some players that had been around this team for the last couple of years. One of the more notable ones, I would say, that maybe has gone under the radar for others is Khaleke Hudson, is a guy that's been with this team the last 2 years. And Chris, our other co-host, made a pretty bold proclamation saying he's going to make the team, and those other guys, Milo Eifler and the other linebackers, were just random no names that weren't going to make the team. But lo and behold, Khaleke is the one that goes to practice squad, and those other guys make the roster. And there certainly has been some other changes for this linebacking unit heading into week 1.
Yeah, I definitely got that wrong. I did not see that coming. I don't think many people saw that coming. I mean, it's not a huge loss. He definitely was, Khaleke Hudson. He was like a pretty much a depth guy for us, mainly a special teamer. But I guess I hadn't really heard much about him in camp, so I guess I assumed that was a good thing. Maybe I assumed wrong. But another familiar face did join the linebacking room here in Washington. Our good old friend, Mr. John Bostic, returns for his 4th season here in Washington. Consecutive season at that. I believe that's the longest tenure he's had with a team.
That might be one of the longest tenured players on the team. Well, despite maybe a breakup in there with, I think he was at New Orleans, right?
Cut by the Saints this preseason.
He is the true on again, off again girlfriend of the Commanders.
Yeah, definitely has been for these last couple of seasons. I mean, I think we got him from the Steelers back in 2018, I believe. But believe it or not, I mean, I know there's a lot of John Bostic haters out there, and I don't get me wrong, I do not want John Bostic starting for this team, but I honestly don't. I actually kind of like the move based on how the preseason played out. Ideally, you want, everyone on your team there at the beginning of training camp and there, for all your install, all of your kind of, all that time, all that, team cohesion that happens, during training camp, over the last several weeks and months. But I do like it because, John Bostic, like it or not, he actually has had some of his career best years have actually been here in Washington. So that either might encourage you or actually frighten you. I'm not sure.
I would say the latter. I would say the latter on that. The guy, the reason for that is that this was maybe one of the only places where he was starting. I mean, I don't think he was starting too often in Pittsburgh, and he didn't make the team for New Orleans. And but it seems like there's always going to be a home for good old John Bostic in Washington.
That's fair. I mean, that's fair. I mean, he's had some of his career years here, and that might have just been out of, necessity for us and the fact that everyone else had a better player on their team. He has a combined 245 tackles for this team. Last year, got injured, and I think it was week 4. Tore his pec, was out for the rest of the year. But But, in a depth role, for us, a guy that comes in, mainly on third down, heavy run situations, or maybe just to spell one of the starters, in Jamin or Cole, I don't mind it. I think he's, I honestly think he might be better than David Mayo, or at least, comparable. I know we still have David Mayo. He's slow, he hits hard, he has those leader skills. He even was a captain for us, I believe at least one of those years. So, I mean, the guys in the locker room do clearly, like him, and that they're likely, more likely than not happy to see him back.
Yeah, I mean, I don't dislike him as a player or as a guy, but this just seems all too familiar. I mean, if you want to go back to the off season, I mean, I know for myself and other fans out there were screaming for linebacker to be addressed this off season, and lo and behold, it's on week 1 starters are exactly the same. Plus, you bring back John Bostic just to do this all over again with the exact same linebacking core. I mean, in a way, it's kind of funny. In a way, it's an extremely Washington Commanders moment that he's back. And honestly, I'm not even that mad. I'm just more. It's kind of humorous.
What does that move tell you? Them doing this.
I mean, do they not have a lot of faith in this linebacking core?
Clearly,
I mean,
they're not comfortable with the depth, but they're also not willing to spend money to address that level of uncomfortability.
right.
So this is what they do. I'm comfortable. Like I said, I'm comfortable with Bostic in a non-starting role, and I think it's better. The fact that they're doing this shows us, like we just said, that they're not comfortable with their linebacker depth. So I'm glad that they're doing this rather than not doing anything at all to address it if they, in fact, aren't comfortable, which they clearly aren't.
Yeah, and I think that when we talk about this linebacking group, it's something that I personally have had a lot of grief with over the years, and we'll talk about the depths of my grief with this team soon enough. But I think when you look at this linebacking core and you open up to the idea of having David Mayo and John Bostic on the roster, you start to at least hope that they provide a benefit for you. And at the end of the day, they're warm bodies at the end of the day. That is what it is. They are warm bodies, and we need them.
I'm fine with that depth. I'm fine with them as depth. I just hope that we don't have any injuries, and hope that Jamin plays well and Cole continues to play well.
Absolutely. I agree. Cole Holcomb is going to be an important person in that linebacking core throughout the season. Hopefully he stays healthy as well. One name that I would like to throw into this about the guys who have been brought onto the team or brought back in a different way. Jarrett Patterson made the practice squad this week. He was a guy I was very high on coming out of preseason. Had a lot of good carries. Seemed like he always made a play with the ball in his hands. Quick feet, smart guy. Teammate of Chase Young in high school. So it's just interesting to see that he's still on the team. You guys have any takes on that? I mean, I think this is a guy that we see in the lineup in that running back room if any of the Commanders get injured this season.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that he was able to stick around. He's a guy that's very easy to root for. A lot of fans love the guy, fan favorite, and I'm glad that nobody else scooped him up. Not to say that he's a hot ticket free agent by any stretch of the imagination, but he's a guy that got some carries last year. He made the 53-man roster initially last season over Jonathan Williams, and Jonathan Williams this time around took his spot. So it's good to see him back. He's a guy that, like you said, people like him. He's a friend of Chase Young's from high school. So, I'm glad to see him back on the practice squad. And I wouldn't be shocked to see him maybe, get called up at some point throughout the year.
Yeah, an interesting note about that running back room really quickly. Sorry to cut you off there, Chris.
No, you're fine.
We have drafted 11 running backs since 2012. And that is a position where you obviously run through guys pretty fast, but
It's a lot.
it's been a position of need for us. So interesting to see a guy like that make the practice squad when I feel like we've had a lot of turmoil at that position.
Yeah, that is a lot. I mean, I think Jarrett Patterson didn't really have a great shot at making the team just to begin with. I think they view him as more of a backup to like a JD McKissick role. I think if you saw something happen to JD McKissick, you would see a Jarrett Patterson elevation. I don't think you see a Jarrett Patterson elevation at this point. Unless there's an injury to either Antonio Gibson or Jonathan Williams at this point. But yeah, definitely a guy. I like the guy. He's a guy, local kid, hard not to like. So, was happy to see us be able to bring him back. In terms of other notables, there really wasn't too many big surprises. I mean, Danny Johnson and Corn Elder were cut and then, in turn brought back to the practice squad, and we signed two kind of guys off the street who had been recent cuts on their respective teams they were on earlier in camp. Guys I'm not familiar with. Looks like Tariq Castro Fields and Rashad Wildgoose.
Can you repeat those names? But before you repeat them, I want you to think about these names on a scale of 1 to 10. How great of names are these? Okay, Chris, go ahead.
They are good names. Rashad Wildgoose, first of all, that's almost as good as Cameron Cheeseman.
Snap reaction, 0 out of 10. How good is that name?
That's a 9. Wildgoose is a 9.
High 8's 9. I mean, when you get rid of Corn Elder and you replace him with Rashad Wildgoose, I mean, that's pretty comparable, I would say.
Thankfully, still have a Corn on the team.
I think if we made any upgrades to this team, we went from an 8 level name with Corn Elder to a 9 level name with Wildgoose.
I can agree to that. I mean, then Tariq Castro Fields was the other guy, not as interesting as a name, but still a beauty of a name. Absolutely.
Hyphenated. I mean, when you think of
6th rounder this year too, which was kind of interesting that they let go. It was from 49ers. Looks like they let go of him, quick. So that is something maybe he's a guy to keep your eye on.
Yeah, I mean, he's a hyphenated last name cornerback. We've seen some good success in the league. Dominic Rodgers-Cromartie is one to note out.
Darius Hayward Bay, former Maryland wide receiver, a very notable player.
True. I mean, so that's definitely something to keep your eye on. If you're sitting there watching,
that's definitely an X factor edge there.
Speaking of hyphenated cornerbacks, CJ Gardner-Johnson went to the Eagles.
Did just go to the Eagles, yeah.
Anyway,
they've been making a couple of moves.
They've been making a splash.
They definitely have.
I'll give it to them.
I'm worried about them a little bit, not gonna lie.
Well, how about we talk about this one last note that we did have on the sheet then. Ryan Kerrigan added as a coach to the staff. What do you guys believe?
I love it. I mean, I'm a huge Kerrigan fan, one of my favorite players, of all time here in Washington. Was officially named assistant defensive line coach. Was, really basically this has happened really quick. I mean, as retired and, really just this past summer and was kind of hanging around training camp with some of the guys pretty much ever since, kind of hanging around, helping out, getting a feel for it. And all of a sudden here we are. He's hired and officially part of the staff. And it was just 2 years ago, he was in this locker room with these guys. So I think Rivera's hoping that kind of familiarity can have an impact on this room. Obviously he likes Kerrigan, thinks he's a great leader, means a lot to this franchise. He clearly likes having coaches that are former players. I mean, you have Jeff Zanina as the head D-line coach now promoted, and he's a former player, and now assisting him is Ryan Kerrigan, former player that a lot of these guys know at least. So I think it's, it makes sense, and it's really awesome to see, a fan favorite like Kerrigan be able to still contribute to this organization in a meaningful way like that. I love it.
Not only is it good from a outside perspective with fans, but I think another thing to take into consideration is how this all played out following the firing of Sam Mills III, because it was clear that there was some sort of issue there, whether that was within the coaching staff or whether that was with players as well. I think I remember hearing that some players voiced some frustrations with him. Bringing in Ryan Kerrigan, who, for one, the leader in sacks for this franchise all time. And like you said, he's a guy that's been in this locker room, and a lot of the players know him. They like him. They want to learn from him. And they saw, the success that he had in the NFL. So, promoting from within and bringing in a guy like Kerrigan, I think hopefully, Kerrigan's going to be a guy that this defensive line, who has all the potential in the world, is really going to want to come together, rally for, and play well.
Absolutely. And I think if you look at this team, one of our biggest talking points, whenever you look at us from a national scale, our defensive line has always been that. For the past few years, we invested draft capital. We got some really solid guys who we've developed. And I think we have a chance to really show what we've made in this defensive line room. Losing a coach is never an easy thing. And I believe that there will be some sort of impact. Now, whether that's positive or negative, that's for the players to decide. I believe Kerrigan is a great add to the coaching staff. I personally have a bit of a history with the man. I met him in a auction once. I want to say in 2012 even.
That's
Very,
awesome.
very. It has to be later than that actually. But anyways, he really was a stand-up guy, and I know that he's made some investments in the region, and I think that if he's going to really be a DC guy, then I think this is what's going to make him. And I'm happy to see him come back onto the team.
100%. Yeah. And then I think lastly, the one last notable thing I'd like to, before we move on here, kick returner, punt returner. So Dax Milne was listed as the starter for both of those. Especially with Robinson sidelined. I honestly think they were going to put Gibson back there if Robinson was healthy. I would not be surprised if that was the case. But Dax Milne listed as the primary kick returner and punt returner for us week 1. I'm okay with that. Doesn't necessarily really surprise me. I mean, any thoughts, fellas?
I think Tom is jumping for joy because he'll get to see his boy Dax Milne hit the field every Sunday, no matter what. And he's gonna have the ball in his hands and make a play. So that's some of my thoughts on that.
Ladies and gentlemen, who let the dogs out? Dax Milne. He has that dog in him. I told you, listen to the name, remember the name. He's going to be on the team and he is going to be making plays. And kick returner, punt returner are extremely important positions on your team. Talk to any kicker, talk to any person who's ever played. The kickoff, the special teams are both very important to both the success of a team and the success of a franchise. I'm happy to see that our leading receiver through preseason was able to make his own spot on this team, carve out a role for himself. I think that he's definitely going to have a chance to do some really good work here. He's in a special NFC East in terms of kick returners. When you think of Cavante Turpin, the kick returner for the Cowboys, I believe, who was the USFL MVP. He is also in this division, so it'll be an interesting kick returner league for us as we go into the start of our season. Now, moving on, getting into this, what do you boys think about this week 1's game? We are against the Jaguars. I believe we are at home. Are we not?
Chris and I will be in attendance for the first ever game for the Washington Commanders in rebrand history. So yeah, at home against the Jaguars should be a good one.
Absolutely sad that I cannot join you boys there. Arizona is a beautiful place right now, though.
You will be missed, Tom. But yeah, pull up, this coming Sunday. Clark and I will be there in attendance and hoping to secure the W. I think we'd have a good shot at the W. I also hope that this isn't a trap game. I've heard people call it a trap game on both sides of the coin, as in, some calling it a trap game for us, some calling it a trap game for the Jags. I guess it depends who you talk to. But I guess, what do you guys think? Do you guys think we have this or?
Well, I think if I went through the tape of this game. I've watched the preview that the NFL network put out. I've watched a few other videos. I watched the last preseason game for the Jaguars. Trevor Lawrence looks solid. There's still a lot of question marks around whether he's going to perform or not. I think one of the biggest things to look for in this game, especially when you're looking at the Jaguars, is the running game. Travis Etienne will be playing in his first NFL game. James Robinson is expected to play on Sunday, coming off of an injury that I believe took him out most of the week, if not the entire week up until the game. So it'll be interesting to see how they split the backfield. And I think with our defensive line, if we can really stop the run, that'll be an important key to us winning this game. From the Commander side of things, I think some names to watch are Wentz, Dotson, and McLaurin on the offensive side. That's going to be the three pivotal players to us winning this year. Is whether those three can find some sort of chemistry. I believe that when you look at the running back room, you're going to see Antonio Gibson getting a lot of the carries. You may see Jonathan Williams splitting carries out there with him. Hopefully they do some sort of split between the two running backs. On the defensive side, I have Alan Payne, Holcomb, and Cameron Curl as names to watch, but harder to tell. What do you boys think?
Yeah, I think a name to watch is Trevon Walker of the Jaguars. I mean, this guy was the number 1 overall pick and nobody's talking about him. And nobody seems to even remember that he was the number 1 overall pick. And while our offensive line, it's very veteran heavy. There are some questions there. I think he is a player that, we're gonna have to key in on. Obviously it's his first NFL game. He's got, a lot to prove, but coming as the number 1 pick, the talent's there. The rest of that defense, I wouldn't say there's that much else notable. But with a new coach in place and Doug Peterson, this is a team that I could see improving. I mean, they've been, one of the laughing stock franchises of the NFL for the last several years. But Doug Peterson's a guy that's won at the highest level. Now, I may be biased, say what you will, but I think that was more due to the just stacked roster Philly had that year. I'm not convinced that Doug Peterson is this mastermind coach, although the Philly special was a pretty good call. But yeah, I mean, I think this is a game that we need to win if we want to be a competitive team this year.
I'd absolutely agree that we need to win it. It would not be great to start off with an L. I think that Doug Peterson, the Carson's familiarity with Doug Peterson makes this an interesting game. And I'm sure he's been able to give Rivera a little bit of intel on some of his schemes and kind of what he did with Peterson back when he was in Philadelphia with him.
Vice versa as well.
As well as vice versa. Yeah, that absolutely goes both ways. You're definitely right there. So, but that definitely adds an interesting element to this. I like the Jaguars back room that they have there. I think that's one of their strengths for sure. You mentioned our O-line. I think if the O-line, if they play solid, which they've traditionally been able to do, and now that everyone is supposedly healthy, among that starting 5, hopefully they can come out and have a good showing and play well and protect Carson and give him some space to work with. Cam Curl, you mentioned Cam Curl, Tom. I hope he's a guy that plays for us. He kind of went under the radar a little bit with it, but he's actually injured in a sling. His arm or his thumb, rather, I think he actually had surgery, he had surgery, a minor sort of surgery of some sort on his thumb or hand. So they're hoping that he's back and ready to go week 1. I think, potentially you see him out there wearing a club even and just kind of playing with that on as long as, he gets the clear to go from that. I don't think you see Logan Thomas out there week 1. I would love to see him out there, obviously, but I don't think you see him out there. I think you see Bates, Cole Turner, hopefully, and Armani Rogers at tight end for us.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Clark mentioned rookies. Also another rookie to watch in this game, Devin Lloyd, linebacker out of Utah. He is on that Jaguars team. They drafted him this year. He was a guy that I really hoped that we would pick up if we were going to go for linebacker depth, maybe even trade up in the later first round to get him. He's going to be a stud. I think he's a guy with really solid instincts and a real motor that will propel him in this league. So that's one note I had on the rookies. He will also be getting his first game. Some quick lines I had about this. My questions for this game are really why Antonio Gibson is a sleeper fantasy running back for week 1. I don't understand why he is. I've seen him listed as such on certain websites. I don't believe that the running game is the key here. I think our running game is definitely a part, but I don't think that he really takes over. That leads into the next question of will the line hold up? I have no clue whether that is true or not, whether the line will hold up. It was a 15th, I believe, last year in PFF rankings, and a lot of question marks still. How is Carson? Obviously the receivers are the biggest question with that too. And the name that I do have underlined right now, Cole Holcomb. And I think if you look at his stats last year, you look at them and you can say, well, that is a guy that made plays. And not to say that he didn't, but there's definitely been some people who have down talked him too. I'm not a part of them. I think he's a great player, but I wonder what take you boys have on that.
Yeah, the guy was a leading tackler for this team last year, and he's kind of a quarterback of the defense, calling the plays for Del Rio. Um, I mean, yeah, I think he's the best linebacker we have on our roster right now. I think Jamin Davis obviously has the potential to be great, but hasn't been able to put it together yet. And, Cole Holcomb for a 7th-round pick, I think he's turned himself into a damn good football player for this team. Will he be able to take another leap forward and progress his game even further? That's to be seen, or have we seen him kind of reach his kind of physical peak? That's a question I think could be brought up.
Yeah, I love Cole Holcomb, and who's a walk on out of UNC. I believe he was a 5th round, but he walk on at UNC. You know, earned a starting role there, and clearly has earned a starting role here. During his time here thus far. Had 142 tackles last year, 1 sack, 2 interceptions. His best year to date with us, I'd say, and I just hope that continues to grow. We need him to perform well. He is the leader of the linebacking room and a leader on the defense. Wouldn't even be surprised if you see him with a C on his chest this year, really. As a guy that has kind of stepped up and become more vocal, I would not be surprised. Not a lock for captain by any means, but would not be surprised if that comes this year or next. John Bostic, for those interested, in the last time he played a full season for us, he had 118 tackles, 3 sacks, and 1 interception. Compare that to Cole Holcomb last year's 142 tackles, 1 sack, and 2 interceptions. So take that information as you will.
Not
No,
bad.
absolutely. And now, just to wrap up this game preview, fantasy sits and starts. We'll go position by position here. Clark, what do you think about these quarterbacks? What do you think? Do you start Trevor Lawrence? Do you start Carson Wentz? What is your opinion?
If you're going to start one of these guys, I think you are either in a very deep fantasy league or you just drafted horrendously if one of those 2 guys is your starting quarterback.
Yeah.
But, if I had to pick one, I'm going to go with Carson for a number of reasons as well. If we remember the last time we saw Carson Wentz on a football field during the regular season, it was against this very Jacksonville Jaguars team that humiliated him and eliminated the Indianapolis Colts from playoff contention. So if I'm Carson Wentz, I'm a brand new quarterback for the Washington Commanders. I'm looking to prove that I belong as a starter in this league following that really unsavory defeat that he took at the hands of the Jacksonville Jaguars in week 18. I want to come out and make a statement. So, and you've got some weapons to throw to as well. So, if you're in that position, which if you are, I'm very sorry because it's probably not the best situation for your fantasy team, but I expect him to have a good game.
So you're saying start Carson Wentz, sit Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, start him. Yeah, start him. Book it, mark it down.
All righty. Chris, any rebuttal there? Any differences?
Start him if your normal starter is somehow injured already.
So you would say Carson Wentz is a sit then?
I mean, depends how deep your league is. If you have Carson Wentz or Trevor Lawrence, let's go with Carson. I think, like Clark said, you're in a tight pinch with either of these guys. They're not my go-to pick, in a fantasy league for either. But in terms of a matchup, could be a good matchup for Carson if things go well. Or Lawrence is, on the flip side. So
it's funny you say that. I have Carson Wentz actually as a backup in my league, and I currently have him sitting. So I will say sit and sit. Looking at the ground game here, you see Travis Etienne and James Robinson for the Jaguars, and for the Commanders, you see Jonathan Williams splitting carries with Antonio Gibson. What do you guys think?
I think I think Gibson, I think is a decent, flex until Brian Robinson comes back. I think he's going to get the majority of the carries. I don't think you see too much Jonathan Williams, maybe in a short yardage or a couple runs here and there to spell Gibson. I think JD McKissick is maybe even the best fantasy play for Washington just from a PPR perspective, in terms of running backs potentially. I really do like McKissick. On the Jacksonville side of things, it looks like Etienne might get the bulk. So I'd say start Etienne, but don't be surprised if Robinson starts to eat into that. Again, honestly, maybe a flex for Gibson or McKissick, and maybe Etienne as RB2 or a flex, or Robinson as a flex in some deep leagues is what I would go with for this position group.
I think Chris is certainly hoping that ETN can just prove that he's a beast of an RB1, because he did select him in the first round. Whether that was accidental or not is to be seen, but he did select him in the first round of our fantasy league. To be fair, it's a 16-man league, so it's a very
deep
deep
league.
league.
It's a
Yes,
deep league. Okay.
it's a
Now,
very deep
did I
league.
panic? Did I panic
Absolutely.
after all the running backs that had already been taken off the board at that point?
Absolutely.
Possibly. But
But you're starting him this week, right?
I am starting him out of necessity as well. So yeah. Actually, you know what? I usually like to take out the guys that I use in fantasy that are playing the Commanders, in real life, just because I'm such a fan. So don't be surprised if I sit him this week, just because I hope he plays terribly, quite honestly.
Yeah, I think you look at this and I say start Gibson if you're in a deep league. He's a guy that's probably going to get a bulk of the carries. McKissick's going to get a lot of the passing plays and maybe even some pass blocking in there. So it's hard to say from the Commander side, but I'd give it to Gibson if you're going to give anyone the start. In terms of the running backs on the Jaguars, I would say Travis Etienne gets the flex start here. Even in most leagues, he might be your second back. He might even be your third back. I'd say start Travis Etienne here. James Robinson, he's a deep league flex. He's not going to get many points. He might get a goal line stand here or two if they really need a power back and they think that he's better than Travis Etienne in that position. But I have it as a start for Travis Etienne and a flex/sit for James Robinson. Now moving on really quickly to the pass catcher side. Obviously Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, probably the main two targets this week for the Commanders. On the Jaguar side, you have Marvin Jones Jr., Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, and Evan Ingram. Do any of those names seem appealing to you?
I think Christian Kirk is going to be their clear wide receiver one this year. They're paying him to be so. And, I think he's a talented player. Is he truly good enough to be wide receiver one in this league? That's to be seen, but he is the Jaguars wide receiver number one on their depth chart and, in their cap space situation as well. So I think that he might have a decent season. And I think that if you're going to start a Jaguars receiver, he's got to be the one to start. Maybe a flex play.
Yeah, he's the clear wide receiver start for them. I think you could see Evan Ingram getting a lot of targets as well. Just, kind of in that TE1 spot for them as well. Forgot to mention, this is also a revenge game for our old friend Brandon Scherf.
Very
This will
true.
be the first time that we face off. I guess he faces off against his old team. We see him in a different uniform, so that'll be interesting to see. I would like to see, Allen, Payne, and some of those guys really kind of get after him. That would be kind of fun to see. Not gonna lie, no bad feelings about Scherf. Loved him when he was here, but would be fun to kind of see some of his old teammates getting on him.
Let's not forget this is also the Andrew Norwell revenge game. That's another
True. Oh my
storyline that
gosh.
the media has just been
Massive
really
storyline.
they've
What
really been hammering that home into the hearts of NFL fans.
Yeah, and I think this is a revenge game for Carson Wentz as well. You look at the playoff history that he had last year with the Colts, where a team with 8 Pro Bowlers, if I'm not mistaken, doesn't make it to the playoffs. So, and this Jaguars team is a pivotal reason why that did not happen. So, important thing to think about for this game coming up.
So another storyline surrounding this Washington Commanders team heading into week 1 comes at the hands of an article hosted by NFL.com. It's their first installment right before week 1 of the NFL Power Rankings. And the Washington Commanders were not treated too nicely by the NFL.com staff, getting listed at the number 30th best team. That's right, 30th best team in the NFL. What are your guys' thoughts on that ranking? Do we deserve to be the 30th best team in the league?
Jesus Christ, hallelujah. Please save this team. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? 30th? So you're telling me that a team with a great defensive line and that has a bunch of great pieces is worse than the Jags, who have been looking lost since the 90s? You're telling me that the Giants, with a man who gets tackled by the turf and with rookies who get injured by people who give low blocks straight into knees, is better than the Commanders? You're telling me a Texans team that is starting a Stanford quarterback not named Andrew Luck, who none of us should even care about, is better than this Commanders team? I think it is
For reference, people, the Falcons and the Bears are the only 2 teams that are ranked below us. But anyways, continue.
Thanks for cutting me off there, man. I mean, Jesus Christ, we are 30th. I cannot believe that you're talking about the teams below us. I don't give a damn about the teams below us. The Falcons are a very good franchise that are hopefully going to rebuild and become strong soon. The Bears are a historic franchise that need to figure out their issues and figure them out fast. The Commanders are not the 30th best franchise in the league. They just are not. And if you're trying to tell me and sell me that sort of some snake oil BS like that, I'll tell you what, take it back to where you came from, because I'm not buying it.
Yeah, I was absolutely kind of shocked when I heard that when you mentioned that the rankings to me and I went and looked at them. I mean, I just think we're better than the Giants, Texans, Jets, and Lions. I mean, come on. Like Panthers, we have a better lineup and a better roster, a better, obviously we're biased here, but objectively speaking, our roster is solid overall, I'd say. And I think that this ranking, I think a more fair ranking would be somewhere in the middle. Maybe that 15 to 20 kind of team ranking. I would put us somewhere in there.
So for reference, again, 29th is the Jacksonville Jaguars. Then it goes New York Giants 28, 27 Houston Texans, 26 New York Jets, 25 Detroit Lions, Seattle Seahawks 24, Panthers 23, Browns 22, Steelers 21, and Vikings 20. I would put us maybe at that 23 spot, maybe the 24 spot. I don't understand how Seattle is ranked so high. I mean, Geno Smith is their starting quarterback, and we're putting them ahead of a lot of these other teams. I mean, I think that kind of low 20s range around there, it might be where we fall. But man, very disrespectful from NFL.com. Not to say that, we don't get a ton of love from the national media. That's nothing new, but to be ranked 30th, I mean, yeah, I think it's ridiculous.
I just have a problem with all the rankings here, man. I mean, you see the Steelers at 21, you see the Vikings at 20. How is a team that lost a generational quarterback and replaced it with 2, from what we've seen so far, very good quarterbacks, not better than a team that just has Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson? that is about it for that team. Dalvin Cook is consistently injured. That defense has looked suspect since the minute people thought they were playoff contenders. That Vikings team at 20 is absurd to me. Now, I think they're right in not buying on the Dolphins. People are very high on the Dolphins right now, and I think that's an issue. The Saints at 14, 13. Are you kidding me? Jameis Winston with a cast of who and a defense of what? I have
That's a little
no
high.
clue. I have no clue what that Saints team is doing up there. You have the Broncos at 8 with a quarterback that's a question mark because Russell Wilson doesn't have Pete Carroll, doesn't have DK Metcalf, has to throw to Jerry Judy, find his guys. I just don't see how they're 8. That seems absurdly high to me. Now, if you're asking me where I think the Commanders fit into all this, 15 to 20 isn't unreasonable. I mean, the Titans are pretty low on this list. You forget that they were one of the best AFC teams last year. The Cardinals are a little bit high at 16 to me. So anywhere from 15 to 20, I could absolutely see the Commanders being reasonably ranked there. Absolutely.
With our schedule this year, I think it's totally reasonable that we end up, somewhere within that 15 to 20 power ranking spot. If not better, in an ideal world, obviously would be super cool to have a higher, or I guess lower, in this case, ranking. But yeah, I think we're totally capable of getting to that. I think that these power rankings, I mean, I think we'll only see us continue to climb up them, as the season goes on. So I guess this is a good starting point.
Yeah, if anything, it's not the worst really thing in the world to be all the way down at 30, because that's a lot of spots where you can jump. And like you mentioned with our schedule, it's something that I think we're very capable of doing. It'll be interesting to see how we progress along the season on this ranking, as well as just in general. It's something that we can go back to maybe at the end of the season, ask ourselves, were we really worthy of being the 30th ranked team in the NFL? My prediction we'll be finishing a bit better than that. But
let's sure hope. There's
yeah,
not much room to go down.
And I think these first 2 games are going to be very indicative of that, because you're facing number 25 ranked Detroit in week 2 and number 29 ranked Jacksonville in week 1. So, if we truly are, a 15 to 20 range, or, creeping into upper echelon, or, mid of the pack of teams in the NFL, we shouldn't be losing to those 2 teams. But seems NFL.com doesn't believe so.
I am sick and tired of us being put down. I believe that we are a good team. And I don't care what other people have to say. My Commanders are my Commanders. My Redskins were my Redskins, and my football team was my football team. I will always believe in them. And now, Chris and Clark, I am challenging you two to face off in a Redskins trivia. Now, it is Redskins trivia because all of the questions do involve Redskins history. The Commanders obviously are part of some of these questions. However, I believe it's important when looking back on history to recognize our roots, and we all started actually as Redskins fans. So, do you accept?
Of course, man.
Yes.
I'm ready.
All right, I have 3 questions for each of you. Each question is worth 1 point. Person with the most points at the end wins. I do have some extra questions in case we do go to OT. However, these are quite difficult, so be curious to see whether you guys can get it or not. Are you ready?
Overtime will not be necessary, Tom.
Oh, all righty. Good to hear it.
Uh-oh.
I will first pose this question to Chris. Which
Okay.
former Redskins quarterback has the most pass attempts in a Super Bowl winning season? Now you have time on the clock. I will call you for timidity after 15 seconds.
Well, you say most
non-talking.
most passing attempts in a quarterback in a Super Bowl winning season.
By a quarterback, yes.
By the quarterback. Well, it's not going to be Doug because there was some quarterback controversy that year. I'm just going to
Indeed.
have to go with Joe Theismann because it's either him or Rippon, but I'll go with Joe.
That is incorrect,
Oh.
Clark. Do you have an answer?
I was gonna say Mark Rippon because I know that season, our offense, and if you look at the advanced metrics, that 91 team is one of the best teams of all time, and a lot of it was due in part to Rippon and those great receivers. So I would say Rippon.
Ding, 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 ding. That is right. Mark Rippon with 421 pass attempts that
Wow.
season. Joe Theismann, 1982, 252 passing attempts. And Jay Schrader and Doug Williams each combining for about 308 passing attempts. So just to put that in perspective for you, ripping out through all of them by miles. Question number 2, Clark, you are up 1-0 on Chris. You will have the question. Since 2012, have the Commanders drafted more defensive linemen or offensive linemen? If you think about that, 2012, that was the year of RG3 in the first round. 2013 did not pick until David Amerson.
Lately, obviously, we've been drafting a lot of defensive linemen, but that's been the big story. And there's 5 spots on that offensive line. Most of the time, there's 4 spots on that defensive line. I'm actually going to say, this is a trick question. I'm going to say that offensive line has been more highly drafted.
That is correct. 17 offensive
Wow.
linemen since 2012, 13 defensive linemen. Clark, you are up by 2 here. Now I'm going to make this a little bit more interesting, and I was ready for this in case this did happen. I have 3 MVPs all time for the Commanders organization. Each name is worth a point. Chris, if you can name all 3, you will take all of the points and win. If you can name 2, you will tie. And if you can't even name 1, well, then I don't even think you're a fan. Are you
All right.
ready?
You said three MVPs or 3 Super Bowl MVPs?
3 MVPs, not Super Bowl MVPs. 3 MVPs, league MVPs. Each name is worth a point. Starting
All right.
now.
Riggins?
That is incorrect.
Ooh.
Golly. I will give you one more attempt. It's a fair guess.
Okay. We'll go Theismann.
Theismann is correct. That is 1 point. Any others you can name? This is for the Trivia Master crown, which I just made up now.
We'll go, I'm fairly certain that this isn't correct. But we'll go with Rippon.
And that is strike 2. One last guess out of you. I will give you these hints to both of you, and Clark, you will receive these hints. And I'd like to see you answer this question if Chris doesn't.
Well, hey, what if I already know the answer?
Well, you can't skip ahead. He's only on strike 2. This is for him to even get in contention with you. He has 1 point. Chris, I'm going to ask that you make your pick now. I'll give you the hint. 1 is obscure, and 1 is from the 70s.
I don't know. I couldn't tell you. It's not. I wouldn't say. It's not. I wouldn't say. I know it's not Daryl Green or someone like that. So.
Is that you? I'm gonna ask for a final guess here.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll lock in Daryl Green.
And that is strike three. I am sorry, Clark, you have won. Would you like to answer this question?
Yeah, I was gonna say, may I just show everyone who the true fan is here for a moment? 1982 season, Mark Mosley, the kicker, won MVP for the Redskins.
That's right.
He
Indeed.
made every single kick until the very last game of the season, but was very clutch all year and in the playoffs. He won MVP. The 70s one, I'm not as confident in, but I am going to say that it was Sonny Jurgensen.
That is incorrect.
It was Bobby
Sonny
Mitchell.
was like 50s or something.
Incorrect as well, Clark. It was not Bobby Mitchell. The 1972 running back MVP for the Washington Redskins at the
Larry
time.
Brown.
Larry Brown with 285 rushes for 1,200 yards and 8 TDs. That was his most notable season by far, outside of his 1970 season where he had 1,100 yards. That is sad. Chris, I was rooting for you, man. I wish it was. I wish it went your way.
Every fan knows that Mark Mosley one, man. Come on. That
The Mark Mosley is an all-time trivia question for you. Those of you out there who ever received the question, what NFL kicker won MVP for the regular season? Mark Mosley is the name that you are looking for. Do you guys have any trivia questions of your own that you would like to pose to either me and Clark or Clark to me and Chris?
I can ask a question. It's not really the historical question, but just kind of kind of getting into a little bit earlier about like how Rivera kind of builds his teams or kind of, I mean, mentioning Bostic, I mean, it's kind of an outlier, right? Bringing a guy back in who's a little bit older. So I have a question to you guys. How many players out of our 53 are 30 years or older?
Ooh.
mm,
So going off the top of my head, Carson Wentz is nowhere near able to be 30 years old yet. I believe he is 27,
he's probably around
29
there,
maybe.
28,
He's
29.
late 20s. Taylor Heineke, definitely not over the age of 30. He came in, I want to say 3 years ago, and he was maybe 26 now, possibly 28. Sam Howell, rookie, obviously not going to be it. Antonio Gibson, probably not going to be it. Jonathan Williams, probably not going to be it. It's mainly rookies at tight end, except for Logan Thomas. So that's an interesting one.
I'm gonna say there are 15 guys that are 30 or over.
You know what? I'm going to say there are 5.
Well, it's in the middle of those two numbers. 5 is closer.
Ooh, 7,
Not quite.
8.
There's 8 total, 7 on active roster.
Oh,
Tyler Larson is 31 and he's on injured reserve. He makes it 8.
So you got
But
Tress Way.
8 of 53 players.
7 of 53 currently.
Sorry, yes, 7 of 53, 8
That's
of the wider
13.2%.
roster.
Just shows to show that Rivera has, 10, and this has been shown, he tends to lean towards a younger team. He likes a veteran or two here, but a young veteran at that. He doesn't really keep guys, much too deep into their 30s. I mean, you saw when he came in, got rid of Adrian Peterson as one of his first orders of business, which I, was not a fan of. I love AP, love all day. One of my favorite players. Wasn't too keen on keeping Kerrigan as a player necessarily either. Kind of let him go. There's been a number of kind of older guys that Kerrigan's kind of let go. Nick Sundberg to name one that he just kind of moves on from. So yeah, you can see like the team really does trend younger. You only have 7 or so guys on active roster that are 30 or older. You got Bostic 31, Charles Leno Jr. is 30. Corn Lucas is 31, Andrew Norwell is 30. As you can see, like the O linemen are a little older, and then F.A. Obata is 30, which I was not aware of.
That is a surprise.
Logan Thomas is 31, which I kind of knew he was around that age. Trustway 32 was what I knew he was around that as well. I
Trey
did not know
Turner?
F.A. Obata.
Trey
Trey
Turner's not
Turner's
30?
29. Trey Turner's 29. So I thought he was
Close.
30 as well, at least. And I looked it up. He's not 30 yet, but he will be soon. We have a number of guys that fit in that 28 to 29 range as well. So a couple, like, good number of guys on the cusp, but definitely a young team overall. So I thought that was an interesting kind of trivia piece to bring to y'all.
No, that certainly is a good one. That also is somewhat interesting too, because you think that could also mean that the veterans that we have had haven't done all that much for us, really. And I think you agree this is a young team, so I think the development, if it goes right, can really push us towards a playoff berth.
Now, I have a trivia question for both of you, and it involves the last several years of this team. Can either of you name every starting quarterback that this team has had since Alex Smith went down? So that 2018 season, week 11 or whatever it was, a November game. Can you name the quarterbacks that have started a game for this franchise since that moment?
So I believe there's 9, correct?
You tell me. You tell me. Let's go through them.
Well, so you have Josh Johnson, who I believe started maybe 3 games. You have Mark Sanchez for a game. Oh, but did he start though?
Colt McCoy. Mark Sanchez did
Mark
start for one
Sanchez
game.
did start. He did start.
Okay.
You got Colt
Dwayne
McCoy,
Haskins, Colt McCoy,
Dwayne Haskins. You have Case Keenum.
Case Keenum.
That's
Or
right.
was he prior?
No, he was after.
No.
He was after.
You have Case Keenum in there with prior to Dwayne.
Ryan Fitzpatrick, technically.
Ryan
Yes.
Fitzpatrick.
He
You have
started
Kyle
the game.
Allen,
Kyle Allen,
Yep.
Taylor
Taylor
Heineke.
Heineke as well.
hmm
Garrett Gilbert
That is a sneaky
for
one. That's
one
the
game.
sneaky one.
That's the sneaky one.
Ooh. Who else? Who does Steven Montez get a game?
No, he came
Ooh.
close in that.
He almost got into
He
one.
came close, I believe, the playoff game because Heineke
Right.
went down.
How many are we missing, Clark?
That's it, actually.
Really? So we got all of them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because after Smith, you have Colt McCoy, who then goes down with an injury himself, which
Mhm.
leads to the Sanchez signing. And after Sanchez stinks it up, they get Josh Johnson, who wins a game against Jacksonville miraculously. And I believe maybe Colt McCoy comes back for the remainder of that season.
Mhm.
Next year, you have Case Keenum
Yep.
playing some
Along
games,
with Dwayne.
along with Dwayne Haskins playing some games.
Kyle Allen enters the
And
mix.
I believe Colt McCoy was still on the team at that season as well.
I believe so. And then next season, Kyle Allen enters the mix.
Yep. Next season's Rivera, year 1, and you have Dwayne Haskins as the week 1 starter. Kyle Allen gets kind of mixed up in there as well, and then you also have Taylor Heineke,
And Alex Smith returned.
and Alex
AK
Smith returned,
AK
and
went to
Alex
the
Smith
dark
returned.
ages.
That's
The
right.
dark ages of quarterbacks. for the
So
Redskins.
I mean,
Alex
Alex
Smith,
Smith was a quarterback that came after Alex Smith.
which is honestly just incredible that he was able to play again. But
It
yeah,
was.
I guess so. If you count Alex Smith himself, that's 10. That's 10 quarterbacks since the middle of the season in 2018.
Mhm.
That wasn't that hard. So you got to give me. I was expecting some more Snyder era trivia.
Ooh.
I got to brush up on some of my older stuff, but
Trust me, as we get into the league season, I think we'll do some more recent stuff. But obviously, I have a few in the bag for future episodes if we decide to keep doing this.
That's all we've got for you folks in episode 2 of the Going Commando podcast. And next time you hear from us, week 1 will be in the past. Hopefully we have some good things to talk about following the result of that game. And we'll be hitting you with podcasts every week of this NFL season and beyond. So for Tom and Chris, I'm Clark. Thank you all for watching. And as always, HTTR and HTTC.